Do you think what he's been telling men more on the, take responsibility for your life and do things, if that, I mean, it's hard to, I suppose, separate it from everything else.
In actual life, people are complex. No villain is simple. No villain is simple, and in great literature, the great villain is a sympathetic figure. You're kind of on board for 75% of it. And not only that, you might also say, well, if I was in that position, I might do the same thing. Like, it's only a cartoon villain who's 100% evil. Even when you meet someone who's dark and psychopathic to the core, you'll find, and I've had clients who were like, I had one client who had like 5 restraining orders out against him. He was actually quite comical. He's quite a young guy, small guy, kind of slight, extremely intense. He had that kind of human shark thing going. And he was quite the horrible riotous blast to work with, because he was a very interesting monster. And 5 restraining orders is a lot.
Yep.
And restraining orders don't work on the sort of people who need restraining orders. So don't be ever thinking a restraining order is going to help you. Not if a real monster's got you in his sights. And he had a paranoid end to him. And what that meant was, if he was ever insulted by you, he would blow the insult up, and it would put enmity between the two of you. So like, talking to him was quite the nightmare, because you didn't get to make a mistake. And he was hypervigilant because he was paranoid. So he's just watching you like a bloody hawk for every deviation from honesty. And like, I never lied to him. And if I thought he was doing something stupid and terrible, I just told him that looks to me like that's pretty stupid and terrible. Like, I wasn't playing with him, and I wasn't trying to impress him. And I talked to him for a long time. You go into an institution sometime, you meet somebody with bureaucratic personality disorder, and they decide that the good thing to do that day is to just screw up your life with some idiot complication. Just because they can.
It's my job.
Right, yeah, well, I have to do this. And they're playing their little power game because they're like Dostoevsky's underground man, and they're resentful to the core. And so they're going to just screw around with you. Well, now and then someone would do that with him. And he'd say, I'm going to be your worst nightmare. And then what he meant was, I'm now going to commit a sizable proportion of my life and all my intellectual prowess to making you as miserable as I can possibly imagine. And then he would go do that. And there was actually, this is in, oh yeah.
Well, maybe you shouldn't be a bureaucratic nightmare.
Well, right. Well, and then and that was the weirdly admirable part, right? It's like, because typically what would happen in a situation like that is you'd go into the bank and you'd just swallow it, and then you'd go out and, go home and kick your dog and bitch at your wife because you didn't tell the bureaucrat to, watch the hell out, or something terrible is going to happen. Well, he was way on the other end of the distribution. It's like, don't muck with me. And he was an honor code guy. It's like, don't muck with me. And what he meant was, don't muck with me. Now, and he meant it. And there was something admirable about that, even though he was a very dangerous person and he had taken it way too far. But this is what I mean by complexity of the villain. It's like, well, he had the courage of his convictions, let's put it that way. And so when you see someone like Andrew Tate, well, first of all, if you have any sense, you think this is a guy that's actually crawled in the ring. And the second thing you think is, well, just because his moral compass is warped, and warped in a serious way on the electronic pimp front, and I think in a fatal way, personally, that's the highest likelihood, because I don't think you can do that without it permeating everything. That doesn't mean that, he's a two-dimensional villain, or that there aren't things about him that are complex and interesting and potentially even admirable, People are complicated, and even the villainous types are complicated. And it isn't surprising to me at all that he's an attractive figure, given the current, war against masculinity. He's exactly he's 100% predictable. He's exactly what you'd expect.
Would you talk to him?
I pretty much talk to anybody.
Oh.
I thought about, whether or not that would be a good idea. For me, generally one of my primary driving forces is just curiosity.
Yeah.
And I am a clinician, I like talking to, I've talked to lots of very strange people, lots of them. And it's very interesting to do that, because you're really wandering into no man's land. And that's perilous and ridiculously, crazily interesting. That's what I loved about, part of what I loved about being a clinician. Almost everybody is interesting enough to be a Dostoevsky character if you start listening to them. And so just ordinary people, if you listen to them, they're ridiculously weird and interesting. And then you find someone truly weird and interesting, and listen to them, it's like you can hardly stand it. Carl Rogers talked about this, he said people won't listen because they're too terrified of changing. Because, if you listen to someone, they tell you how weird they are. You share in that self-revelation. It's too interesting. So, and I'm sure talking to Andrew Tate would be too interesting.